Good morning, friends. I know it has been some time since I have come on and spoken with you, but I have been through quite an ordeal, quite an experience, and it has affected me. And what I'm here to talk about today is something I'm having a deeply personal experience with, but I am very acutely aware that it is a global phenomenon that's crippling people right now, and it's called survivor's guilt. So I'm going to as I do, I'm going to use my own personal life as an experience so you can get a tangible understanding of what is coming through, the downloads that I've gotten, and how I'm processing it. So, as some of you who may be following me already, or maybe you're new, you don't know, I had to go on an emergency trip to Poland to be with my father, who ended up in hospital after a critical fall, and he's 86. When he got into hospital, it was discovered that he has probably prostate cancer, but he won't let anyone examine him, and that he has dementia, and that the stress of the hospitalization, the fall, amplified the dementia. So he was disorientated, confused, aggressive, and after his fall, he was meant to rehabilitate his legs because he broke his knee as well, so he could walk. But because whenever he's recovering, he rips out all of his tubings, he goes into urinary retention and renal failure and has to go back and forth to hospital, which is bringing up his war trauma survival fear more, and it's bringing up more defensiveness and aggressiveness, and so they've had to sedate him. But when he rips out the cords, he doesn't tell anyone, and then the pain of not being able to release has caused him to bite on his tongue, and then he has bite marks from the pain, and it's just horrible to witness. My sister and I and our family have done everything we can to connect him with the best care that we possibly can, even though he refused to sign up for insurance in Poland because he thought he could get his insurance from, South Africa or where else he's lived. So it's been so costly to get him the care, and we're all trying to figure out how to do it, and it's just horrific to see him, and he didn't really recognize us. He wasn't really lucid, or he was sedated, so it was hard to connect with him. And we sorted out what we could when we were there, my sister and I, and now I've returned and I've been back here in Australia for a few days, just trying to get over the experience, the jet lag, the time zones, everything that it's bringing up in me, and also consciously aware that I committed to sharing this journey with everyone as an example of how to overcome really dense experiences, really dark, really frightening, really horrific experiences, and still expand and still quantum leap into your future, into the 5D, as the first wave, bringing in the new frequencies of our evolving reality, our evolving planet. But what I was bumping up against was survivor's guilt. How could I be stepping into higher frequencies and expansiveness when my father is lying in such turmoil and trauma and horrible circumstances? And yes, he put himself there for a lot of the choices he made, ended him up in this situation. We've been battling him for years to try get him into somewhere that's more familiar. But he is my blood, he is my last remaining parent. And how can I be enjoying my life or cultivating success or being creative when he is going through that suffering? It really stopped me, and anytime I wanted to come on and share with you or show some of my tools, I was like, how can I even be doing that when he is suffering? And then I've done a lot of the quantum breathing. I've worked through a lot. I did a really beautiful heart activation last night with David's work, and it dawned on me that this is what is happening on a massive scale right now with all the wars that are going on and all the suffering in the world, that us open-hearted empaths, when we see the horrific things that are happening in the world, we feel like we cannot focus on elevating and amplifying ourselves. We have to rush there and do whatever we can and sacrifice our time and energy and ourselves to just remedy that situation. I know a lot of my beautiful open-hearted friends are doing that with Gaza, with Ukraine, with the Druze that are being genocided, or protecting the groups that are being scapegoated, like the Jews or the Zionists or the Muslims or the Russians. Like, there are people that are going to either end, trying to do everything they can to protect those who are being targeted for whatever reason. And I think that work is so important. But what I understand in the path that I've walked through the mystic studies, through the occult studies, through my own personal experience, is that if you are going into these places in a frequency of hopelessness, despair, pity, anger, fear, depletion, you are just adding to that density, and it's amplifying that reality. And that the most powerful thing that you can do is to resolve the weight that you're carrying. And we're going to speak about guilt in this. I'm going to give you an example of how to resolve the guilt of the survivor's guilt, to resolve that within you and then expand and amplify. So, and when you do that, then when you interact with the situation, you inject a much more potent force of light and frequency that can amplify and elevate that situation. So there's a concept called quantum weight, where if you are self-aware enough to recognize, and apologies, someone's whipper snipping their land nearby, if you are aware enough to sense the weight that you're carrying, whether the weight is of guilt, of shame, of fear, if you are aware enough to feel where you're holding it in your body, and for me it was like right from my throat into my heart, into my gut, to understand that that is a powerful force of frequency and light encoding that you need to unlock in order to expand and elevate. So what is unlocked with guilt is the wisdom of how to manage the situation better next time, or when you're confronted with it. So for example, I'm feeling guilt that when I was around my dad and he was sedated and I couldn't have, even though it's not really my fault, but I couldn't have the moments of connection, of telling him what I wanted to tell him, of connecting with him in the ways that I wanted to. And that now I have to get back to my life because I have a mortgage and I'm in the process of making a business and trying to generate income to take care of myself and my animal and my godchildren and those who are dependent on me, and be here for my clients. And I'm not there just waiting around for the few moments when I can connect with him, because he can't use the phone right now, because he's forgotten how to use his phone. So what I was guided to do with this we're calling it a quantum wait in the tradition that I'm working right now, which is quantum jumping and quantum healing, is you feel the weight and you determine what the wisdom is within that heaviness. And then you use the observer effect to focus on the wisdom that is held within that weight. And then that weight becomes a frequency that elevates you. So the wisdom that I have in there is that when I was there and I was in fear and distress of not having things go my way or being able to sort things out, and I did do this a few times, but to sit and get my field coherent and get my breath coherent and to just sit with him in that space and to breathe what I'm feeling from him and what I'm feeling from me and to alchemize it. Now, there were a few moments where I was present enough to do that, and it was incredible, the shift that happened in the space. But I felt like I could have done it more. And that now, when I'm at a distance, to understand that there's little that I can do when he's within the medical system right now, in and out, going from care homes to psychiatric hospitals, to intensive care units, to regular hospitals, with all the medical stuff that's happening for him, that I can sit and I can connect with him and I can still breathe and I can feel what he's feeling and help him process and help me process. And in that way, I'm elevating the frequency and the consciousness and the collectives that are in this situation. And that, as I said, as I saw, one example is when I was in Poland and my sister and I had to wait 5 hours before we could go to the next engagement to do with him, and we just didn't know what to do with ourselves. We didn't have a car, so we just sat at a cafe for 5 hours, stressing, trying to look up, different services that he could get, and just feeling so helpless. And so then I just put everything down and I closed my eyes and I meditated and I breathed and I was present with everything. And then suddenly, even though the reception wasn't working so well, a phone call came in from a family member who just heard and was like, I can look this up for you, and then contacted someone, and then an avenue opened up just by sitting there, and somehow the Wi-Fi opened up and a call came through. So, being international, you don't have the SIM cards, and we didn't have time to organize all that because it was just go, go, go when we got there. So what I want all of those who are within the first wave, all of those who are consciously co-creating a pathway for themselves and the collective, going into what we call the 5D, which really is just a term for a more evolved way of living, of being in an open-hearted space, in heart-mind coherence, of connecting with your timeline, with your reality, with the people in your field, and then elevating that and jumping that up to a more multidimensional, a more, utopian way of existence, which is possible if enough people can align with that. There can be little cohorts. So those of you who know this is possible and who have been seeing it in their lives, but then are confronted with something horrific that's happening in, the rest of the world who are not of that frequency. Because, as I say, turning a blind eye is not a good or healthy thing right now. And when you tap into that, whether it's survivor's guilt of I'm here in this safe country when there's people in a war-torn place who don't have enough food, who have lost their family, or for me personally, my father's in hospitals, confused, disorientated, in pain, to understand that you are here in this environment because you being in an elevated place and through quantum entanglement, which I've mentioned before in my other videos, which means that whatever you're consciously resonant with, you're linked to. When you shift yourself, that naturally shifts. So you are in this environment being able to consciously shift your frequency through quantum breathing, through still point breathing, through consciously just breathing into that pain, that turmoil, that guilt, that fear, being fully present with it until you go into the observer of observing yourself doing it and witnessing what's going on, and then connecting with the observer who is beyond the circumstances, who is linked to all that is the creative force, and then the love and the beauty and the compassion of witnessing yourself in that situation. It lifts and expands you. And when you're in that expansive place, then you can observe the horrific thing from that expanded mindset, and then it elevates that. So in the last few minutes of this talk, I would like us to do that together. I would like you to focus on any really horrific, horrible, painful, stressful situation that you might be in, that you might be witnessing, that you might have vicarious trauma or be directly involved in. And we're going to breathe into being fully present with that. And I'm going to guide your breath. And then we're going to go into the observer of that, the compassionate observer. And then we're going to breathe into the feeling sense of the observer and where they're at. And then observe the greater collective thing from that mindset. So let us begin. I want you to just close your eyes. And I'm going to be sharing the golden frequency with you all as you begin to just become aware of your natural rhythmic breathing. It's important not to try, but just to be aware of where you're at with your breathing. And as you breathe, I would like you to put your attention on the feeling in your body where you're holding that weight, that quantum weight, and to breathe into that and become aware of the wisdom that is sitting within the core of that weight. And to begin breathing your focus into that wisdom and letting the feeling of that wisdom fill that heavy space, and to move beyond that heavy space into your body, into your whole being, and to just really enjoy and relax into that sensation as you're breathing rhythmically into that space. And if you can, at the top of the breath, to hold a still point in between the in-breath and the out-breath, in between worlds, where the example of the elevated state, feeling sense, can fill your being, where the expression of the transcendence begins to open up to your field. And as you're doing this, I want you to put your attention on the observer that is witnessing you do this, witnessing your focus, your breath, the still point that expands you beyond the circumstances, between the in-breath, between the out-breath. And I would like you in that still point to feel into that observer that is observing you, and the feeling sense of what that observer feels and witnesses, and the love that is the expression of that feeling. And from this love space, I would like you to now turn your attention on that situation or circumstance again that brought up this heaviness in you. and to witness it from that wise mind, from that evolved perspective, from that source infinite heart intelligence, and to just breathe and just breathe and just breathe. Take a moment to enjoy the feeling within your being from that breath, from that sensing, from that feeling, from that witnessing. And know that you can return to this place anytime, any moment, with just a breath. And to slowly bring yourself back into your body, into your being, and into the understanding and gratitude that this mere breathing has done an incredible shift and service to the quantum weight, to the weight that you've been carrying, to the situation you've been witnessing. And to feel that knowing and that faith within you as you bring yourself back to this moment in time and get back to all the things that you need to be dealing with within yourself, within your mind, within your day-to-day activities. And with that, I will leave you in Lakesh Alekin. So much love for those of you who are on this wavelength, on this frequency, doing this work with me. Thank you, and I will be back soon. Much love.